You're watching Portfolio Makeover, a new original series from ETF Guide TV. I'm Ron DeLegge, and today we're going to examine a $789,000 investment account for Morris and Jan in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, the combined value of this portfolio consists of a traditional IRA and a joint brokerage account. We'll dig into the details in a second, and I'm going to tell you what I like about their portfolio, what I don't like, and what can be improved. So let's dig into their portfolio, and we'll begin by introducing you to Jan and Morris. So like I said, this is a $789,000 investment portfolio. He's 64, she's 62. He's an agricultural consultant, and she's a teacher. They're self-managing their investments. They consider themselves moderate risk takers. And this combined value consists of a $228,000 brokerage account along with a traditional IRA. That's his, with just over $561,000 of savings. So let's dig through this portfolio. But actually, before we do that, let's give you some details about Jan and Morris. Both are self-employed. They contribute the maximum amount to their IRAs. For 2023, by the way, and this just changed, the cap or max is $7,500 per IRA owner for those above age 50. And it's $1,000 less if you're under age 50. They don't have any Roth IRA or Roth 401k account. And thankfully, no major health problems. Both plan to continue working until age 70. Some of their major concerns: they want enough income to pay for everyday living when they hit retirement age. I think that's something we can all agree with. That's something we want. They also said that, listen, we cannot afford to have any major setbacks because of a market event. And then they're also worried about rising U.S. federal debt level and how that's going to impact them later on with Social Security benefits and Medicare and taxes. So I think we can all identify with that. And we're going to take a look now at their specific holdings. We'll begin with the traditional IRA, and this is his IRA. This is consists of mostly, well, actually all ETFs. And these are all, for the most part, income-oriented ETFs, with the exception of IVV, which is a broad S&P 500 ETF. And you see the biggest holding there is that Gabelli Dividend Income Fund. We're going to dig through on the cost on that ETF or that closed-end fund in a second. Actually, that's a closed-end fund. That's not an ETF, so I stand corrected. But you'll notice that the overall strategy of all of these products or funds is, for the most part, to generate high income, and they're doing that. They generated almost over $33,000 of total income. This portfolio did in 2022. And then you can see that the correlation to the market it's almost just about highly correlated with the broader stock market. A correlation of 1 would be pretty much the same. We're at 0.99%. And then this portfolio did have a 22% decline that it experienced from April to September of 2022. So that was a pretty big decline. Since then, there's been a little bit of a rebound, so that's good. In terms of the other portfolio, this is the joint brokerage account, a taxable account held between Morris and Jan. This is pretty much a very small portfolio. You can see kind of the same thing happening here with the focus on generating income. The largest holding here is IVV, which is the S&P 500 ETF from iShares. Now, this is the same ETF that Morris holds in his IRA. You can see here in the joint brokerage account, it accounts for the biggest portion of this overall portfolio. The next biggest position is that Buy Right Income Fund from Nuveen, and that's a covered call strategy, which, again, they seem to like. They did generate in 2022 almost $12,000 of income on this portfolio, and they did have a 20% decline from January to September, have since recovered. So that's the overall holdings of their combined portfolio. Now, we're going to dig into specific aspects of their portfolio. We're going to drill down and take a look at the risk, the cost, the diversification, taxes, all of that. And before we do that, though, let's spin the wheel to see which of these categories we're going to start with for analyzing Morris & Jan's portfolio. All right, so we're going to start with risk. And you can see that the combined allocation for their portfolio, this is the asset breakdown. They've got over 95% allocated to stocks, over 4% to bonds, and then nothing to real estate, commodities, or cash. So from a risk perspective, they told me that they're taking a big hit during a market correction was a concern. Well, I don't see that reflected in this portfolio's risk level. They've got 95% to stocks. That's very high. It's certainly not aligned with their risk tolerance or their age. So if they're truly more moderate or more conservative investors, then this portfolio should reflect that, and it does not. It definitely needs an adequate cushion, or what I call a margin of safety. Now, let me just get off real quick on a point that I'd like to mention, because it is related. The problem with traditional risk tolerance questionnaires, and you usually get these when you work with a financial advisor or if you open up a new account with an investment firm, is that these risk tolerance questionnaires satisfy the lawyers and they satisfy the compliance departments at investment firms, but they don't make your investment portfolio any safer. And the main reason is because of the flawed structure of these questionnaires, is they completely ignore the margin of safety framework by erringly relying on asset allocation and diversification alone. So don't make the same mistake. I'm telling this not just to you, Morris and Jan, but to everybody, because this is a rookie mistake that's perpetrated by the financial services industry, and millions of everyday investors are less safe because of it. So let me be clear, again, and explicit. Attempting to manage portfolio risk with asset allocation and diversification alone, it's like going to a rodeo with a donkey. You don't do that. You take a horse or a bull to a rodeo, not a donkey, and you don't have to be John Wayne to know that. Next up is diversification. We see the same thing happening. They've got a heavy load or heavy exposure to stocks, a little bit to bonds, and they miss three major asset classes: real estate, commodities, and cash. By the way, they're income-oriented investors. Real estate's one of those wonderful income-oriented types of assets, so that would be one to keep on your radar in terms of adding to this portfolio to broaden the diversification. The other thing I would say is that they own a lot of the same thing. So a lot of the same types of funds that all kind of do the same thing. I'll give you my thoughts on that in a second. Next up is tax positioning. So how diversified are they from a tax perspective? Well, there's only three places where you can keep your money. Now, normally I have this labeled as the tax me now. That's usually labeled as your taxable account. The tax me later is your tax deferred accounts. And then the tax me never are your tax advantaged accounts. So tax me now, examples of that would be like what they have with the joint brokerage account, right? Because you're getting 1099s every year. You get dividends, you get capital gains. You're going to pay taxes on that right now. Tax me later is like 401k, or in this case, traditional IRA. And you're delaying the taxes. You're not eliminating them. And you're going to pay them later on at whatever the income tax rate is in the future. By the way, it's going to be much, much higher. Income tax rates are going to skyrocket. That's why we want to contain how much we keep in our tax me later bucket. But you'll notice the tax me never bucket, they don't have anything. And from a planning perspective and retirement lifestyle perspective, that's a problem. But what excites me about their situation is I really think there's a good chance for them to get that tax me now, or rather that tax me later money, that $561,000, to get that to a situation where they can distribute that money by RMD age, which in this case is 73, and get that totally tax-free. And so I'll talk about that in a second. But this is an exciting situation to be in. And if they do some planning right now, I think they're going to be set up really good for retirement. In terms of the cost of the portfolio, they've got no margin borrowing. That's good. No brokerage commissions. Blended expense ratios north of 0.5%, which is, if you're an ETF investor, if you're hardcore, that's like, that's a lot of money. But most of their assets are parked in the types of specialized funds that typically have higher expense ratios. That's what you get when you invest in specialized, covered call funds or specialized strategies. So I don't think it's really that bad, but it is costing them almost $4,000 in annual fees. The big one, though, that's eating lots of cost here is that Gabelli fund. That GDV is a ticker symbol. That's 1.28% annually. Yikes! That's a lot of money. So I think there's some definite cost cutting to be had there. In terms of their 1-year performance, they declined about almost 12% versus a almost 1% gain for a matching benchmark. And so their combined portfolio over the past year lost a little over $100,000 on paper. These are unrealized losses, but nevertheless, they have had a little bit of a setback in terms of their performance. So what do I like about this portfolio? Well, first of all, it generates a lot of passive income. Over $21,000 between both accounts in 2022. And I like that. So that's a good thing. Nothing wrong with that passive income while you sit and wait for your money to go up in value. What I don't like about this portfolio? Well, a lot of things. Number one, it's got uneven diversification. Now, what I mean by that is their portfolio simultaneously suffers from both over-diversification because they own too much of the same thing. They've got those covered call funds. They own a lot of that. But at the same time, they've got under-diversification because they miss some of those major asset classes like real estate, cash, and commodities. And when you combine a portfolio that's over-diversified on one hand and under-diversified on another hand, you come up with the Ron DeLegge uneven diversification definition. And so that's what this portfolio suffers from. Also, look at the risk that they're taking. 95% of their portfolio allocated to stocks, no margin of safety. Benjamin Graham would have a heart attack if he saw this portfolio. And so for investors in the early 60s, they've got way too much allocated to stocks and certainly a sustained market decline along with retirement withdrawals when they kick in. Thankfully, they haven't started that. But if they were in a situation where they were drawing on these accounts to generate income, to sustain themselves in retirement, I think they'd be in deep trouble. They'd be at a situation where they could possibly deplete most or all of their retirement portfolio in a sustained decline type of market. And that's not even factoring in the possibility of a major healthcare event or a long-term care crisis, which would set them back even further. Also, they've got really poor tax positioning. And I'll tell you what I think the solution on that is in a second. And then they lack a written investment policy statement. All investors should have that. It doesn't matter if you're managing the money yourself or if you're working with a financial advisor, you should have absolutely a written investment plan. It's like going to war without a plan. No one in their right mind would do that. So what would we do to make over this portfolio? How would Ron DeLegge improve this? Well, first of all, add a margin of safety. And the exact amount? Well, that's why I came up with the margin of safety calculator at etfguide.com. And I've got links to that in the description section below, so that can help you calculate what the margin of safety for Jan and Morris should be, the exact percentage of the overall portfolio. But then you have to implement that, so there's 2 steps. And then what about adding some exposure to those missing major asset classes? We talked about cash, commodities, real estate, and then adding a written investment policy statement, reducing investment costs. I think this portfolio, they're getting $21,000 of annual dividends, passive income. I think they could get probably 10, 15, maybe even 20% more by just lowering the cost of some of their dividend funds. So that's something to look at. And then this is the part that excites me. This goes back to what we talked about, the tax positioning. You remember they had $0 in their tax me never bucket. And so if they started shifting deliberately money into the tax-free zone through a combination of Roth IRA contributions and Roth IRA conversions, man, that would set them up to get those RMDs from that tax me later bucket completely free. And let me explain that to you. Tax-free. So they've got 9 years before RMDs kick in, right? He's 64, she's 62. So 9 years for him. And age 73 is when RMDs kick in. That age, by the way, just changed with the Secure Act 2.0. But if they don't start repositioning money into the tax-free zone, that's the Roth IRA type of accounts, his IRA, if he just keeps doing what he's doing right now and does nothing, if he doesn't listen to anything I say, and he just keeps stashing away money, saving it, and accumulating it in the tax me later bucket, he's going to have about $1.1 million in that account by the time he hits age 73. So what's the problem with having $1.1 million in a traditional IRA when you're 73? In year one, Morris is going to have an RMD of almost $40,000. And those RMDs are going to keep getting bigger and bigger each year. And in a rising tax rate environment, big RMDs mean big taxes. And it's a nightmare scenario that can totally be avoided with some smart planning. If he can keep that RMD at or below his standard deduction, and for married couples, it's $25,000 and change, guess what? He can get that RMD completely tax-free because the standard deduction is going to offset the RMD. So that's just one strategy that excites me about Morris and Jan's portfolio and just their whole situation, but it's going to take some planning. So that's some of the things that I would do to improve this portfolio. And that's pretty much it, folks. That is it for today's program. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I certainly have. And certainly check back with us, Morris and Jan. Let us know how you're progressing. And if you'd like to get a portfolio makeover, well, get in touch with me. Hit the description section below, and we can do a one-on-one, and we can examine the strengths, the weaknesses of your portfolio, and find out what can be improved to make it that much better. I'm Ron DeLegge. Thanks for watching Portfolio Makeover. We'll see you next time.